6 reports from the 6 breakout groups yesterday.
Mine is public policy and advocacy, and I want to thank Joe Meyer for putting together the paper. Leslie Strauss helped on the taking notes. My name is Peter Hanley. I'm with CASA of Oregon. The first question was, how can we communicate better with policymakers? Out of that came, we need to create more noise. Start with something that can build some momentum over time so that we can get folks something to rally around. I was reminded also of some shaming campaigns that have happened in the past, and I know when I first started out, one of the first things I had to do or got to do was watch Harvest of Shame in 1960, which was the first time folks got via the television a look at poverty. And I think sometimes shaming can be a very effective tool, and I don't know if we've done a shame campaign in a long time, and I think most of us like to accentuate the positive and eliminate the negative, but I think we really need to start looking at, is there a way that maybe we want to take that as one way to do this? I think also, on the positive side, we do want to look at those folks that have been able to put positive messages out there and been able to do it really well. Some of the stuff that Habitat's done, and then how do we use TV, social media, et cetera, to do this effectively for everyone. One of the other themes was everything starts at the local level, and so to the extent we can take those great advocacy pieces that have been done around the state and locally and really lift them up to a more national level to all of our benefits. Better connections with the ultimate consumer of our services. Let's remind folks that should be our supporters that government is not bad. There was a reason that democracy prevails over dictatorships. See, this is where I probably started adding a few things that my folks weren't. We need to create more allies among the interest groups. In our group of 10 that were talking about this, we had 5 national policy and advocacy organizations that maybe hadn't come to this conference before, and I think they got a good eye to where we're going and perhaps how they can help us. So how can we create those allies? How do we piggyback on other people's events? In Oregon, it's like when the wheat growers, the Farm Bureau, and other folks come together for their barbecue, stand out there and say, "Don't forget the farm workers." So try and piggyback on some of those events. Use other people's lobbyists. Collaborate with groups that have similar interests and create a shared interest. Create better policy messages. Make sure to call out the importance of the role of public money at events. Find other ways to debunk those who only want to criticize government, and remind them that government was created to create a more just society. What are the themes that will resonate at state and national level? This is where I probably got a little more creative, so pardon me. Create a standard high-impact way of measuring the importance of housing on jobs and the economy. Build, and here I'm just going to list them, kind of themes, 3 or 4 sentences. Building strong communities. Rural is for everyone. It gives us food, fuel, and fun. Working people need jobs too. Vets need housing too. Geez, everyone needs housing. Did you know that a disproportionate number of veterans come from rural areas? Housing improves communities. Housing as an infrastructure investment. Housing attracts a stable workforce. Healthy rural equals healthy urban. And my favorite, farm workers are the one and only true homeland security. So how can we invest in advocacy and public policy to be sure rural is heard? And here it was, back to the old fart theme. We need the youth out there to help us present these messages. So how do we involve youth? How do we take them with us when we advocate? They understand the social media. They understand things a lot better than some of us of advanced ages. Let's get them out there. Support state and local coalitions. Make advocacy part of your marketing plan. Give folks time off to collaborate with other related organizations to create the web. Connect and collaborate. Last question was, are there new models? And once again, I think this is where the younger folks can show us how to be better tweeters, bloggers, and Facebook aficionados. Get unusual allies working together, find an issue on which opposing sides can agree. It's powerful when people see folks that don't normally work together, working together. Keep it going all the time, not just around election time. Once again, get the kids involved, let them make the pitch for us. Make advocacy part of your daily work. Send an email daily to your elected and other important officials. Use Housing Assistance Council and other partners' research and materials. Try to find new ways of putting your message out there, perhaps using simulations. Put a comedy routine together, make it fun. Use inclusive language. Clients as the advocates, create the web, connect the folks all up from the client all the way up to the top, and then do some voter registration along the way. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm David Haney from Wyoming, and we failed to appoint a presenter. And so I ended up in that role, and Keith's taking care of his children at daycare or whatever, who was our scribe, so we don't have any notes to drive off of. So this is a little bit strictly from memory for everybody. And for those who were participants in our roundtable, please feel free to speak up. I think one of the things that we all recognize is that there are significantly smaller resources in rural America. And as a result of that, it means we're going to have to do some things differently than we have before. Our area was in the area of partnerships and collaboration, and I think that addresses some of those reductions in resources that we've got, whether it is in the form of human capital. We all know it's the same 10 people that serve on the school board and serve on the city council and do everything else in smaller communities. So it's very difficult to leverage the human capital that exists, let alone the physical dollar capital that exists or doesn't exist, as the case may be. I think with the changing tone in Washington, where the vast majority of resources come from for us to deploy in rural America, we're going to have to make our arguments in a little different fashion than we have in the past. We're going to have to pay more attention to the economic impact of what we're accomplishing and where that comes from, whether in the form of jobs, whether in the form of, and I don't know, somebody in our group was discussing the Department of Corrections and somebody coming in and out and in and out and in and out of the system a gazillion times. It cost $1 million to incarcerate the poor guy. You know, are there better ways of doing that through coordination or collaboration? I think we also, particularly given our rural character, know that in order to build partnerships amongst two communities that have fought each other tooth and nail over the course of the time, or in our case in Wyoming, the tribal areas where we have two tribes occupying the same reservation, how do you build a collaboration amongst folks to do that? And then how do we drive that up from the local level to the regional level, to the state level, to the federal level? How do we begin to bring those people together? And I think, as Peter suggested, housing, no pun intended, has a tendency to be the foundation for a lot of those elements of things that we work in and around. But there's a heck of a lot of other specialties, community development specialties that exist out there in the form of education, in the form of health care, in the form of jobs, whatever it may be. And I'm sure there's a list a gazillion miles long, youth that Peter talked about, that we saw up on the stage in the last couple of days. How do we bring those people together? And can we, as quote-unquote housers, act as a catalyst to convene some of those parties to get them talking with one another, to try to build some kind of a system where we can speak with a more consistent voice across a number of disciplines and demonstrate the additive advantages of 2 + 2 = 5. How do we create that extra impetus that comes along with what we're doing? And one of the few ways of doing that is we all have our own little fiefdoms, and we are all trying to protect our own territory and our own funding sources. Some of that we're going to have to give up as we move forward to try to build those partnerships and collaborations. I think one of the great observations was that as we do that, assuming we as housers take a leadership role in that space, is to make sure we convene in a neutral territory so that we don't overlay our own priorities into what everybody else is thinking about their own space. And I think that's an important piece. Now, I'm not sure who the right convener is for those things, but I do think we can take a leadership role to try to bring many of those people together and those players together to try to do that. Given that, I think we need to be strategic in how we go about doing this. And one of the comments made yesterday is we need to really be focused on outcomes. What are the positive outcomes that we're expecting as a result of the collaboration, and where do we go? So with that, we also asked the question, what might HAC do to be helpful to us, whether we're in our little tiny microcosm or whether we're in a broader group? And I think some of the best practices that certainly must exist out there to enable us to bring people together as a collaboration and look at other successful collaborations where it's gone beyond just the housing constraint, but to all of the various other disciplines of community development is critically important to us. I think the other place that HAC can be very helpful to us, whether we're driving it down to the local level or whether we're doing the national piece, is getting us data to substantiate and measure the successful outcomes of whatever it is that we're undertaking. And a lot of us don't really have that predisposition or discipline in our own shops. That may be a place where HAC can be very valuable. So that's about it. And if I've missed anything, folks, raise your hand, whoever was there.
All right, thank you, David.
You bet.
Appreciate it.
Good morning. I'm Susanna Nardi with Rural LISC, and I'm going to report out on the technical assistance session. And we had a very diverse group, probably about 25 or 30, which was nice. We underestimated who we were going to have. One of the first things that came forward was that we probably should have split our group into 2 focus groups because the tribal issues and the rural issues, while there's similarities, they're very individual. And actually, that's probably the biggest takeaway from our group was that for technical assistance, along with everything else, you really need to meet people where they are. And the first kind of big point is that the webinars, et cetera, they're generic, they're general, and they're not as effective for rural groups or tribal groups because everybody has individual caveats to what they're trying to do organizationally, regionally, state, state regulations, state administrations vary from state to state. And so what we hit on was that really to provide effective technical assistance, we need to provide more coaching, one-on-one, peer-to-peer, helping folks with their individual organizational and political needs. And that consistent, steady technical assistance that's built on trust, relationships, knowledge of the organization and the political environment that they operate in, is specific to their individual organizations, is really the most effective technical assistance. And what, this is my words, but what I felt that the groups were really crying out for: help us individually figure out our project, figure out our organizational needs, and help us move forward. Something else that came up was that a lot of times technical assistance comes when there's already a crisis. So in terms of investment of resources, whether it's human, financial, if we can do that early and consistently, instead of just coming in when it's already in crisis mode. Be proactive rather than reactive. Another point that was very loud and clear was that there really needs to be consistency from our federal funders in terms of their interpretations from the local to the state to the national, and that it needs to be consistent from state to state. The tribes have this issue with HUD. The rural folks have it with USDA. I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. We've talked about that. But that really, and you know, we talk about it with the 502, we talk about it with everything else, but in technical assistance as well. There's a feeling that our federal funders, they're more interested in compliance issues rather than balancing that with some technical assistance. In other words, if you have a question, but you are afraid of the answer, or if you are already down a road and you need help, there's a reluctance to reach out and ask that question because the compliance hat comes on. So figuring out that balance. The other thing that came out loud and clear is we need a communication pathway. A lot of folks don't know how to access the technical assistance that they desperately need. And as we all know, rural can be very isolating. So how can we first of all, how can we have a clear pathway to technical assistance, the variety that is out there? How can we package that and market it and make sure that the rural CDCs, community-based organizations, the tribes, how can they access it? How can they know? Do we have a clearinghouse? What do we do? I don't have that answer, but it's definitely something that came up. So in terms of actions, we're going to have some follow-up discussions, probably by webinar, but in terms of trying to solve or at least communicate some of the issues, probably do that with a tribal focus group as well as a rural focus group. And the one takeaway is that to provide effective technical assistance, you have to meet people where they are, and that's not happening clearly from our discussion. Thanks.
Good morning, I'm Russ Caney with Enterprise Community Partners. We had an active and lively group, about 25 people attended the session on change or die, and that's actually with a question mark, change or die. Adaptation for survival. The first issue we got into was the evaluation process of your organization. And first let me say that the polling of the folks that were in our group represented organizations that generally have been around for more than 20 years. So for them, I think they have made changes to survive that long. Excuse me. And so I think a lot of the comments that came out of that were from experience and adapting to change, particularly over the last several years. There were several comments made about how often to make an evaluation of your organization, everything from daily to weekly to quarterly, but I think generally annually seem to be the consensus, because you're not only doing a financial analysis of your organization, but it's a good time to also look at the efficiency of your organization and working with the programs, but also your personnel and your human capital, your human resources, and are they aligned correctly? Are they working on programs that really are going to launch you forward? We talked about the 2 M's, and the 2 M's are mission and money. And trying to get to that sweet spot as an organization to work on your programs that have high mission and are making you money, have high money content with them, and really taking a look at some of the programs that maybe aren't fitting into that sweet spot. Knowing your horizon, there are organizations that have, and if you don't have a person, perhaps you want to think about someone that can do some of your long-range thinking. Many of the organizations have someone that are looking 3 to 5 years out in the future and trying to establish what some of the changes may be, and then being ready for that and being ahead of the curve. Part of that is really developing and understanding what your core competencies are as an organization, skills assessment of your staff, so that you're ready for when those changes come about. How do you cut back on programming and personnel, and how do you know when to do that, and also how much? A lot of that comes down to dollars and the bottom line. When do you say no to requests or for programming that comes to you as an organization? Sometimes you have to say no if those services aren't going to be paid for, you don't have the staffing to do that. And then adapting to services that are needed in the community, and then continually looking at new lines of business. Holding staff accountable. A lively discussion on how do you compensate staff. The old way, you hire somebody, you give them something to do. At the end of the year, you give them something else to do. But more and more staffing and more organizations are looking at outcome-based performance, tied to salary, bonuses, performance-based compensation. In doing that, you have to have fair compensation, however, and the employees and the staff need to understand the financials of the organization and how you make money and how that money is going to be shared and how you don't make money and how some of the programs make money or don't make money. And there are, of course, barriers to this accountability. There's regulations, there's other priorities of the organization, resources, of course, the mentality of the staff and the mission was discussed, and it goes back to the saying of, you know, we've always done it this way, and that may not be the best response going forward. You have staff that are long-term employees, they're dedicated. Can they change to help move your organization forward? Profit versus nonprofit and competition from the for-profit side. Markets fail, nonprofits step in and take up some of that work. Markets get better, is there competition from the for-profits that are starting to step on your footprint or some of your business lines? Be willing to take risks. Discussion on boards being risk averse and really educating boards about housing and other programs that are going to have some risk, and how do you mitigate that risk, but also perhaps taking on more risk in the future. Talked a bit about mergers and joint ventures and partnerships with other groups, really trusting those linkages. What are the benefits of doing that, but also the trust factor of working with other partners, and then potential partnerships with public housing authorities and or their potential competition, particularly in the housing area.
Good morning. I'm Laura Buxbaum. Our we were in the dwindling USDA Rural Development Resources Group, which doesn't sound very inspiring, but I think we came up with some positive outcomes. Our note taker was, I thought, going to bring the large notes, and he didn't, so I'm going to squint at my pictures of them, if you will bear with me. So our session was facilitated by Tom Collishaw and Sullivan McGahey, who also wrote a provocative two-pager on this issue. And it posed some interesting questions about whether the resources are dwindling to the point where, you know, should we even continue to advocate for them? Are there other ways to create affordable housing in rural areas? Oh, there he is. I wasn't going to name any names, Mike. Great, thank you. And we started out by, by talking about, well, first of all, I think there was general agreement that the programs are very valuable and we do want to continue to advocate for them. But we started out by continuing the discussion that Moises had with the secretary about, well, should they maybe go somewhere else? Maybe should they go to HUD? And there was very strong consensus that the programs are designed in such a way that another agency couldn't necessarily take them on, that rural development has its own structures and processes in place that generally work very well, and that we need to continue to advocate for them where they are, but advocate for more resources and for changes that will make the programs work better for us. The other issue that came up very early on was that we had in the room some people who had a very a single-family perspective and others who had more of a multifamily perspective, and there was fear expressed that the renewal burden for rental assistance was going to balloon so much that all the other programs, single-family in particular, were going to get squeezed out. We agreed that that is a danger and a threat, but we also came to a strong consensus that we all need to advocate for all of these programs and that it isn't going to help us if we end up allowing ourselves to be pitted against each other. So that was a principle that we all agreed on to begin with. We talked about we talked about ways to increase the resource. There was discussion that I think we've all already heard over the last couple of days, that there's a view that the administration requests are consistently too low for programs. We heard loud and clear the secretary's feeling that we focus on programs and not on salaries and expenses that he feels he needs, that they need to run these programs. But we continue to think that the programs are the most important, and that we need to work with RD to find ways to deliver them efficiently and effectively, and not to the exclusion of increasing salaries and expenses, but can RD use nonprofits more and more effectively, as is happening to some extent with the 502 packaging? Are there other resources that can be brought in that can help these programs be sustained? We asked the question, because there's been pretty strong Republican support for these programs, where the administration again has put forward low numbers, and Republican appropriators in particular have added money back in. Is a Republican Congress actually an opportunity for us? Maybe in the short run, but we also acknowledged that the overall atmosphere in the Congress is one of cutting, not expanding, and that also possibly this is a different makeup in the House, particularly of Republicans who may be more conservative and understand our programs less. So we're not sure if that's an opportunity or not, but we'll continue to rely on the folks who have supported these programs and go back to them and try to get the word out to others. We also noted that other programs that work well with our programs, particularly multifamily like CDBG and home, are also shrinking, and so there's a need in the long run to try to expand the pie. We didn't talk very much about how to do that. You know, I think we're hoping to get through the next couple of years. We talked about ways that the department, with our help, maybe could reduce some costs or make things work better. We acknowledged the work that Administrator Hernandez has been doing with the multifamily staff. Some of us were at a meeting on Tuesday and heard about some improved processes. We're really excited to see what's going to happen with that and whether that will help, particularly the process of transferring multifamily 515 housing from existing owners to new owners who will rehab and preserve it. That will be a big help in stabilizing the situation. And so we want to support efforts like that that will improve the processes, make not just multifamily, but other kinds of refinancing or development processes work more efficiently, work better, take advantage of our resources as much as possible. We talked about other tools that might be helpful. Some of the suggestions were if non-RD debt could be refinanced, that could help free up some resources. We talked about the housing trust, the National Housing Trust, as a potential resource for multifamily housing, and I think single-family housing too. I'm not. We talked about it possibly being used. It's for very low-income, extremely low-income folks, but there's some possibility there. And we are hoping that Mel Watt does begin to release some funds to the Housing Trust so that we can start to see how it can work, and that in the longer run that we can advocate for housing finance reform legislation that will provide a lot more money to the Housing Trust Fund. I think I mentioned home and CDBG funding. We agreed that we need to advocate for that as well. Let's see. The big question for us is, can the zero-sum game be broken? And that's not just within USDA. Clearly, that is for federal programs as a whole. And I don't think we answered that question, but I think that's kind of our charge going forward, is to get the word out that all of these programs that help to provide and preserve rural housing, affordable housing in rural areas, are valuable, are needed, are cost efficient. We can make them more so, we can make them work better, but we need to continue to advocate for them. We also noted that there is a new Undersecretary of Rural Development who started this week, Lisa Mensa, and so that's a possible opportunity to help support some of the things that Administrator Hernandez and his staff are working on. We should get to know her and offer our assistance and ideas and hear what she has to say. So, in summary, we want to continue to advocate for essential programs at USDA. We want to help USDA find ways to reduce operating costs. We want to, this is a little bit repetitive, but pursue administrative and legislative ways to pursue administrative and legislative ways to reduce rental assistance costs. We talked also, Larry mentioned the possibility of using existing reserves to save a bunch of money. We want to, one of the recommendations was to try to centralize the guaranteed single-family home program nationally. Is that right? Yes. Oh, okay, so that had to do with processing of 502 guarantee, and that it could be more efficient if it was centralized. Did I get that right, group? I know I see some of you here. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm not much of a public speaker, so you might have to forgive me. The topic was the current or next generation of rural housing, and we pretty much talked about how to get youth involved into this organization. We broke it down to five simple and short ways. The first is to start thinking about more creative ways to do outreach, such as turn to social workers, churches, Chamber of Commerce, internships in colleges, high schools, work-study programs, and AmeriCorps. The second is it's important to do outreach in rural and urban universities and stress the professional responsibilities in the rural organizations. How it's, it's everyone's duty to help everyone on the outside of town and everyone help each other. The third is to grow your own. Establish policies for interns that introduce them to the field, and after their internships, keep in touch with them, working with clients and recruiting those individuals. The fourth is know what your organization can support. Internships versus AmeriCorps, Youth Build, colleges oriented towards religion or spirit of service, such as, I'm in the South, so we have a lot of Bible belts. We have a lot of schools that tends to go religious, and so we always like to go to them and like, well, it's good to help each other, and it's, it's for the community, and it's what God will want, it's what the Lord will want you to do, and we try to play on that. And the fifth is stressing the intangibles and qualities of life in rural areas. And we said that it was some of the young that like to go rock climbing and like to, do a lot of things outdoors and be with nature, and so it will only be best for them to work and help people outside in nature in rural areas where you couldn't do that while you're in the city. That's it.
Thank you.